Unit 5, Lesson 3, Changing Elevation. So on number 1, it says to draw arrows on a number line to represent the following situations. So first, you notice we have our line, but we are missing numbers. So the first thing you have to do is fill in your number line. So it says to draw arrows that represent the temperature was -5 degrees. So from 0 to -5. Then the temperature rose 5 degrees. So that means I'm moving 5 degrees to the right. So again, this is adding opposites. On B, a climber was 30 feet above sea level. Then she descended 30 feet. A climber was 30 feet above sea level. So we start at 0 and go to 30. And then it says she descended 30 feet. So that's going down or to the left. So 30 feet to the left puts me back at 0. Number 2, what is the opposite of running 150 feet east? That would be running 150 feet west. Jumping down 10 steps. So it would be jumping up 10 steps. Pouring 8 gallons into a fish tank. That would be removing 8 gallons from a fish tank. .2, a mountaineer is climbing on a cliff. She is 400 feet above the ground. If she climbs up, this will be a positive change. And if she climbs down, this will be a negative change. So on A, she started at 400 feet, positive 400 feet. Her amount of change was 300 feet, and she went up, so that's a positive change. So if I start at 400 and I move up positive 300 feet, my final elevation would be positive 700 feet. On B, I start at positive 400. I move 150 feet. This time I'm going down, but I'm moving less amount than where I started, so I'm still going to be in the positives. Now I would be at positive 250 feet. For C, I start at positive 400. I move 400 feet down. So down would be like negative, a negative change. So this is adding the opposite. So my final elevation would be 0 feet. On D, if you start at positive 400 feet and your final elevation is at positive 50 feet, that means we know we had to go down to get to 50 feet. To go from 400 down to 50, we would have to move 350 feet down. On B, it says write an addition equation and draw a number line diagram for B. Include the starting elevation, the change, and the final elevation in your diagram. So we start at positive 400, so from 0 to positive 400. We have a change of going down 150 feet. So there's 50, 100, 150. So there's my amount of change. And I know my final elevation is positive 250 feet. So I can just place a dot on that point of the number line. Okay, now we need to write our addition equation. So we started at positive 400 feet. We moved down 150 feet. So since I'm moving down, I move to the left, which tells me I'm using a negative 150. And my final elevation is positive 250 feet. Number 2, a spelunker is down in a cave next to the cliff. If she climbs down deeper into the cave, this will be a negative change. If she climbs up, whether inside the cave or out of the cave, and up the cliff, this will be a positive change. So for the spelunker, she starts at negative 200 feet, and she moves 150 feet down. So that means I'm going further into the negatives. So my final elevation would be negative 350 feet. On B, if she starts at negative 200 feet and climbs 100 feet up, she would finish at negative 100 feet. C, negative 200 feet, and she goes 200 feet up. So that would be an elevation of 0 feet. On D, negative 200 feet, and she moves 250 feet up. Well, we know 200 feet up puts us at 0, so an additional 50 feet up puts you at positive 50 feet. Start at negative 200, and we know our final elevation needs to be negative 500. So to get from negative 200 to negative 500, I know I have to go down. And I know to get from 200 to 500, there's a difference of 300. So she would have to move 300 feet down. And B, it wants to write an addition equation and draw a number line diagram for C and D. Include the starting elevation, the change, and the final elevation in the diagram. So I start at negative 200 for C. I move 200 feet up, so that would be the positive direction. And I finish at 0 feet. So my addition equation would be negative 200 plus 200 equals 0. Okay, so on D we start at negative 200. Now we're moving 250 feet up again, so same direction, but we're going an additional 50 feet. So that puts us at positive 50 feet. So our equation would be negative 200 plus 250 equals positive 50. On C, what does the expression negative 75 plus 100 tell us about the spelunker? So that means the spelunker starts at negative 75 feet. She climbs, because it says plus 100. So it says plus a positive 100. So she climbs 100 feet up. The second question says, what does the value of the expression tell us? So I know negative 75 plus 100 would be positive 25. So her final elevation is 25 feet. 3.3, adding rational numbers. So it wants us to find the sum. So remember our order of operations on number 1. So we must complete the parentheses first. So 30 plus 5 would be 35. All right, now we're left with negative 35 plus positive 35. We know these are opposites, therefore my answer is 0. Okay, we see parentheses here, but if you notice, that's just a negative inside the parentheses. There's no adding, subtracting, multiplying. There's no operation inside that parentheses. So that doesn't really mean anything to me. So if I have negative 1500ths plus negative 8500ths, so it's a negative plus a negative. So if I start in the negatives and I add in the negative direction, that means I'm going further negative. And that would put me at negative 1. So now I have negative 1 plus 12.5. So if I drew a number line and I drew my first line from 0 to negative 1, I would know that I need to move 12.5 spaces to the right. So 1 space to the right would put me at 0, and I would need to move an additional 11.5 spaces. So that would tell me my final answer is positive 11.5. Number 3, I have 1/2 plus negative 3/4. Before we can add fractions, we must have a common denominator. So I know that for 2 and 4, I can use fourths. So 1/2 is the same thing as 2/4. So 2/4 plus negative 3/4. So since I have the same denominator now, I can ignore that. And that's the same thing as saying 2 plus negative 3. So if I start at positive 2 and I move 3 spaces to the left, because this negative tells me to go left, that would put me at negative 1. So I know my answer is negative 1/4. Lesson 3 summary. So the opposite of a number is the same distance from 0, but on the other side of 0. So the opposite of positive 9 is negative 9, and the opposite of negative 9 is positive 9. When we add opposites, we always get 0. When we add two numbers with the same sign, the arrows that represent them point in the same direction. Therefore, the sum will have the same sign, whether it's positive or negative. So if I have, this would be positive 4 plus a positive 3. So it's going to be positive 7. Whereas here I have negative 5 plus 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm moving 4 spaces to the left. Therefore, it's a negative 4. And I land at negative 9. So when you're adding two numbers with the same sign, your answer will stay in that sign. So two negatives equal a negative. Adding two positives will equal a positive. When we add two numbers with different signs, we subtract their magnitudes, which means the size of them. So since the arrows point in the opposite direction, the sign that has the number with the larger arrow will tell us what our final answer will be. So if this represents negative 5 plus, we see it moves 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. It moves 12 spaces to the right, so it's negative 5 plus positive 12. So you see we land at positive 7 because 12 is a larger number than 5. Therefore, it takes the sign of the larger number. So since 12 is larger than 5, our answer is a positive number.